F-Zero is an easy game to overlook. Being a launch title with the SNES way back in 1991, for many gamers it was the more mainstream and long anticipated Super Mario World that drew their attention. However, F-Zero has an incredible heritage and pedigree, and it wasn't until I learned this much later in life that I felt like I really needed to go back and try the game for myself. Not only is F-Zero often touted in many a gamer's top games for the platform lists, but it's also credited as being the game that is single-handedly responsible for Super Mario Kart, and that's quite the boast. Mario Kart was a game that I spent too many hours on in my youth. So let's try F-Zero. The game is split into multiple cups and difficulties similarly to Mario Kart, but only offers 4 cars to select from. That's not to say that this is a problem, because Mario Kart's roster has always been a bit bloated, but the game does little to add personality to these cars and their drivers. In fact, it turns out that all of the backstory to the game is in a comic book in its manual, which is sad news for those who are picking up the game as a kart only. Either way, the word on the street is that you always pick the pink car, so pick the pink car I did. The tracks take place through a well-varied range of visual styles, and one of the immediate things that strikes you about the game is that it's essentially one huge tech demo for the SNES's Mode 7 scale and rotate features. This would have impressed the hell out of me as a 6-year-old boy. The other really striking thing about F-Zero, which you notice as soon as you get into a race, is just how unbelievably fast the game feels. This is something that many racers struggled to achieve at the time, but F-Zero runs at a breakneck pace. As you race around the track, you'll accrue up to 3 boosts, which you can spend for quite a generous burst of speed to help you in your endeavours. And at the end of each lap, the game provides you with this little pit lane, which, as long as you're driving through, will give you a repair to help keep you in the race. This is a great reprieve, but can be a little hard to actually stay in the pit lane when you're going at top speed. Speaking of hard, it's no secret to anyone who's played this game previously that it is hard. Frustratingly hard, some would say, and I'd kinda be inclined to agree. Whilst I'm all for a challenge, the difficulty of F-Zero always feels a bit disconnected, like there isn't much that you can do to overcome it. The controls can feel very all or nothing at times, with the constant necessary micro adjustments seemingly producing varying results depending on the mood of the game. And the CPU AI drivers are absolute gremlins. Driving into them slows you down a lot, so you'd think that the AI would be programmed to be the same to them. But it's not, and they'll use this to cut you off, to ram you, and to otherwise bully you around the track. I was left with the lasting impression that the difficulty in F-Zero is just a little cheap. That said, it wasn't all doom and gloom by any measure. Once you get used to the cornering, being able to take corners at such high speeds feels really good, and being able to corner through a short section of corners cleanly makes you feel like quite the superhuman. You can also destroy enemy cars by driving into them at high speed, which feels great. And the game has these cool speed boosts and jumps on the tracks to keep things interesting. I only played through the first cup, but the level called Deathwind certainly should have given me a clue as to what I was getting myself into. And it did, with the wind making it super hard to hit speed boosts cleanly and locking you into barriers out of nowhere. Pretty tricky stuff. However, despite this, it cannot be said the game doesn't reward your hard work. When you complete a cup, you get this beautiful Mode 7 victory lap of joy, which is great fun to watch. And the music accompanying the levels is definitely catchy and great quality. I mean, just listen to this tune from the track Silence. And so with all that said, let's give F-Zero some arbitrary scores to try and sum up how I feel about it. The difficulty curve I'm going to give a 3. It would be fine for the game to be this hard if it achieved it in a way that felt less cheap. The difficulty is absolutely surmountable, but for me I like a game where I don't feel like I have to get lucky to beat it. That said, I am glad the game is harder than Mario Kart because it's good enough in other areas for me to want to come back to it. The visuals I'll give an 8. There is very little here not to love. Bright colours, loads of Mode 7, great looking cars. A little lacking in variety when it comes to on-track assets maybe. It's definitely not a deal breaker, but it does prevent me giving this a 9 or a 10. The sound scores an easy 7, and again, most of the sound is stunning. It is almost entirely great stuff, especially the music. It could have easily got a 9, but the engine noise is so high up in the mix that it can make it really hard to appreciate the rest of the sounds sometimes. Playability gets a 6. Twitchy controls and a cheap challenge make it very hard to score high, but it has to take an above average score purely on grounds of being so addictive. Whilst it is annoying at times, it makes you want to come back and prove who's the boss. So overall, the game gets a 6. And I'm honestly surprised that it ended up coming out at a 6. Based on the general regard people have for F-Zero, I expected to be handing out another 8 today. Maybe I missed the point. Maybe it just doesn't hit the same for me, but F-Zero is an above average game with some great points and some low points. Worth picking up, yes, but not an all-time great for me. So sadly, no squid for this one, but if you remember to like, subscribe, and enable notifications, you'll be able to easily check in and see which games do earn the squid of approval in the future. So thanks for watching, Speed Freaks.